if they have a cup of water that's stress, the things that we go to get less stressed, right? Whether that's TV or movies or our phones or video games, are not like taking the cup and pouring it out. Like it's actually just putting more water in an already full cup and then starting to overflow, right? And so you need to reset the cup. You need to pour the cup out. Like you need to empty the cup, and inputting things is not how we fix things.
Welcome to Rebuilding the Village, a podcast that seeks to explore the causes of modern problems by examining the roots of our metaphorical village through the systems and structures in society that may have been disrupted in the technological and industrial era that we inhabit. Thank you for joining me today. You've got a compelling, inspirational story that started off kind of rough, if I recall. So if you're cool with it, why don't we start off with where did you start? Let's start with your story that got you to where you are.
Yeah, absolutely. So without running through every single bullet point on the list, right? I was a kid, grew up in a military family, moved around a lot, and had some really challenging mental health issues in my youth. I suffered a panic attack disorder to the point of where like I would have to like raise up my hand in school and run to the bathroom in every period and have a panic attack and come back to class, and had some real struggles with my own personal identity and you know who I was, and you know that has a lot to do with regional stuff and also a lot to do with just everything that is going on in the modern context of the world. Despite my bald head, I'm 26 years old. So I'm very much in the kind of the Generation Z upbringing, right? There's kind of three models, right? There's the digital native, the digital hybrid, and then the people who are like new to digital in their lives. Like social media either happened at some point in your adulthood, it happened before you kind of came into your teenage years, or it happened, you know, during your teenage years. Really, the advent of social media happened like as I was in between. So really, I don't know like a social existence without it. That being said, it all culminated with me trying to take my own life when I was 16. And so that was really kind of the rock bottom of everything. But it was honestly the greatest thing that ever happened in my life because it made a realization that I needed to figure out how to change my life. And so from there, I kind of went on a journey of, okay, how do I get better? And over the course of the next half decade, I made really, really wonderful strides in my life. I went to college. I had a wonderful experience in college. I had taken a job at a Forbes top 5 hardest jobs to get out of college. Selling into C-suite executives. I had wonderful friends. I was living a life really authentically as myself, and felt the need to share my story when I was 22 and wrote this article, kind of not as more about the journey that led up to me trying to take my own life. Honestly, just because I felt like I was living a lie. I wanted to tell people, hey, listen, like this is the person that you were dealing with, and I just felt like I was hiding something, and I wanted to tell people. And the idea of like having to text people individually was a lot, so I was just like, I'm going to write this down and send it to people, and I ended up publishing it, and it went viral and changed my life. And from there, in the preceding half decade, I've been helping people, you know, in my own personal interactions with getting better. But what was missing from that article was, how do you get better, right? What were the steps I took to actually go from a suicidal teenager with no identity and no idea where he's going to a super confident, by all accounts, successful 25-year-old who is living a life that most people dream of living? And how do you make that journey and how it's possible for everybody? And so I wrote this book called The Real Confident You to say, what was that journey? What was it like? And what are the things that every single human being in their life can do to defend themselves against kind of the modern context that is seemingly driving everybody towards maybe not mental health battles for everybody, but at least towards a more lonely and sad existence.
Interesting concept I came across recently, which is talking about attachment versus authenticity. And the idea being that as a kid, you will sacrifice authenticity to save attachment, for lack of better words. That is more important to us biologically, socially, to be included in a group than it is to be ourselves. And that a lot of people go through their lives with this sense of not being who they really want to be because they're more concerned with being part of the group. And depending on maybe what time period in history you're talking about, if you were like an artist in a wartime, we just needed more soldiers. Or if you were like warrior and things were peaceful, we didn't need to kill anybody. So it was going to be a little bit tough. But nowadays, especially, the world is such that you really could be anybody you want to be. And I think a lot of people are trying to figure out where their strengths are, where their interests are, where their talents are. For you, what was I'm trying to get the word here. Who were you trying to be when you were younger that you were fighting against that you are now?
Yeah, I think I just wanted to fit in. And I think that's probably the case with every kid, truthfully. But I think who that kid was changed based on the regional context of where I was living, right? Like I think it ended up being a blessing in my life later on because I have so many like touchstones that I can talk to people about. You know, like if I talk to someone from the Northeast or from the West Coast or whatever, like I have like I kind of get the regional like feel of who the human being is. But people are really people are mostly the same, but there's little differences everywhere. And so figuring out like how to climb the social hierarchy of each place meant like taking on a new identity and personality, you know? And I think it became that I think everybody is kind of lying to themselves at that age, but it became a lot more evident to me that I was lying to myself at those ages. So, you know, I always had, and I think everybody does this, you know, like interests that you're hiding and that you think you're too cool. Like the cool kids don't like, so you won't do them. You know what I mean? I think like at my worst, I was like a real jockey asshole, you know, like a real preppy piece of shit. And I think that was probably the worst identity I ended up taking on. But I think for the most part, it's just wanting to fit in and be cool, be like the person that seems to get everything when you're 17.
Yeah, and those younger ages, especially, it's very superficial. A lot of people just chasing after, and a lot of the industries that popped up, trying to capitalize on that, like like how fit you have to look and how good you have to look, and that's actually a big major problem you mentioned with social media before. That a major issue in today's day and age is this, like maybe through time there is a benefit to wanting to be in good shape. There's a benefit to wanting to take care of yourself. The problem becomes when you take that idea and you amplify it to a million times over.
Right.
Like it's so good to be if you're a teenager, you should be in good shape. You don't need to be 6-pack rock hard abs like
Right.
great. You should just be in decent shape. When you take that idea, amplify it to 100, and then problems start to arise. Or in the case of social media, one of the bigger issues is, like you said a second ago, climbing to the top of a social hierarchy.
Yeah.
And it's the thought that comes to mind with that is, my first question is like, which social hierarchy? Because there's so many sub hierarchies within any population you're looking at, but it may just be the one that you found the coolest, or maybe the one that you found friends with, or maybe something you're trying to run away from, and something in yourself that you see in them that you want to attract. Like maybe you're a little bit heavy set and you see like the really fit guys, the jocks you mentioned a second ago, and you want to be like them. So also you start like getting really big into health and wellness and fitness, and you're not really that into it, but you're doing it because you're trying to run away from the fact that you feel comfortable in your body, rather than learning to just accept who you are and finding a healthier group dynamic somewhere that you would fit into better, and then climbing that social hierarchy.
Yeah. I think there's something specifically insidious about social media in that, like, great book called The Status Game that is better than my book, and everybody should go read that book first. But all of our subconscious is constantly evaluating where we are in status next to the people around us, right? The problem with social media is it's a distortion of that reality, right? None of those people have as much status as it looks like they have on the internet, and their reality does not reflect the reality that they're actually living, right? Like Susie is out with her friends at the winery, and they all look super pretty, and they look great, and they look shiny and happy. Like you don't see that they argued all day on the bus. You know what I mean? And like her friend Jennifer got way too drunk and like started yelling at her about her wedding day. Like none of those things are seen, right? So humans are always going to do this and always have done this. The thing that's different about our modern context is that it's what we're comparing ourselves to is not reality, right? It's a fake version of reality. And like it happened in the previous generation, right? With branding and marketing and all that stuff, right? I think women were uniquely affected by that. When we get into the whole body image conversation and all that stuff, but now, I mean, it's people don't even. It's one thing to change the lighting in a photo. It's another thing to change the way a human being looks, right? Like the Kardashians have made an entire career not actually looking like humans, and we've all commoditized ourselves, right? Like all of our personalities, everything that's about us is like a product for sale. And so when you take those individual aspects of us that maybe started, like I love health, right? Like I love working out. But now, if you take that piece, you can put it on social media. Um, and so now, not only do you want to be better than other people, but you're rewarded for seeming like financially, right? Like attention is now a financial means. So we talk about high school and our teenage years, but this has made like that Bowling for Soup song real. Like high school doesn't end for most people. Like it's forever. You know, you are constantly faced with the mean girls and the mean guys of the internet. And so for an individual, right, for like you and I think it's just a constant realization. You have to constantly check in with yourself that like this is not real, and you can just don't buy in, like to constantly not buy into that system to live a happier life because it's fake. It's fake, and most people are just stuck in it. You know, it's also addicting in nature, right? So now you're addicted to looking at the people who are not real, and it's hard. It's hard for people.
Yeah, what's funny, the reason I was laughing is a second ago, I used to do tutoring years ago. Specifically one day, I was working with this young girl, and it was basically like one on three. So I'd be working with 3 students at once, and I would cycle through each student. And I was working with this one girl. We were all doing math problems. I get up, I go print up some stuff and like use the copy machine to make some like copies of math problems. Come back, sit down, and this girl has her phone in her hands, and she just like throws it on the desk, and she's just like, I'm just. She's just like, she was so frustrated she couldn't get the words out. And I was like, oh, what, are you okay? Is everything all right? And she's like, my friends, they're just, you know what? And this is exactly what she said. Like, I just can't wait till I'm done with high school so the drama ends. Yeah. And I started laughing hysterically. I'm like, I am so sorry to tell you this. Yeah. It's going nowhere. It's only probably going to get worse as you get older. Yeah, you're right. Some people do really just get stuck in high school. They get stuck at a point in their life. And there's a million different reasons as to why that could be. And it could be just in developmental patterns. It could be in like childhood wounds. It could be whatever it may be. But they will get locked in these behavioral loops in a way without even realizing it. And things like social media can really capitalize on that in a really toxic way.
Yeah, they reward those behaviors, right?
Yeah, and there's a lot of stuff. If you remember, there's a book, The Anxious Generation by Jonathan Haidt, and he talks about how the algorithm will pick up on certain things at a young age and gradually push you through sequentially in certain directions. Or a good example might have been, it'll target a young girl who's like maybe like a 10, 11, 12 years old, who wants to be more popular. She wants to be like her friends, wants to do this. So she starts, Googling, how do I put on makeup? How do I do this? How do I do that? And then the algorithm will pick up pretty quickly. All right, cool. Here's some makeup tutorials. Here's some fashion suggestions. Here's some ways you can do Photoshop a little better. And then it gets more insidious. Like, well, here's a way you can start dieting. Here's a way you can start being more anorexic. Here's maybe look into plastic surgery. Maybe you need to put on all this. And then you start getting these, at least for the young girls, women today who are just so drenched in makeup that to me, I almost look at like who's under there. This is it's like a clown mask going on. Like you're trying so hard, but part of that, unfortunately, is there is a natural inclination for women to try to outcompete other women in the sexual marketplace for certain reasons. That's fine within context, within the context of within a healthy range of saying, yeah, you should try to get in good shape, wear a nice dress, wear whatever it may be. But then it's like, I can literally physically modify my body on a surgical level to try to get guys to find me more attractive rather than accept who I am and find somebody who would accept me for who I am.
Yeah, it's Snapchat dysmorphia, right? Like the amount of facial surgeries happening to people under the age of 30 is like skyrocketing. Mm-hmm. The amount of women I know in my generation that are getting preventative Botox at 22 years old.
God forbid you get wrinkly when you get older.
Yeah, right. But again, right? Like you're not comparing. No longer are human beings comparing themselves to the, 20,000 people that they'll probably interact with in their city or their town. They're comparing themselves to 8 billion people, right? Amplify on top of that those 8 billion people don't actually look like what those 8 billion people look like on the screen. Now you've got a recipe for disaster, right? Yeah, I think it's first of all, everybody should clean up their own algorithm. That's a start. You can clean up your own algorithm. So go through the first 20 posts on your Instagram, like your reels. If you're on TikTok, go through your first TikTok section. Twitter has this now, right? Because it used to be that you follow someone and then that's the content you get. But now it's just, it's an algorithm feeding machine, and we can talk about how all that works, right? Jonathan Haidt did fantastic work on that. But take those first 20 posts. There is the I'm not interested in this function. Like, evaluate what each of those posts is doing to your life. Like, is this actually providing me value? Am I learning something? Am I growing from this? Does this just make me feel anxious or bad about myself? Or is this showing this cousin to me because it's actually one of the worst parts of my personality that I want to indulge in? And if it's one of those things, you can just hit I'm not interested. Just do that once a month, and your algorithm will look completely different. Right? Like, you got to be intentional with this stuff. You have to guide it to where you want it to go, because otherwise, it's just gonna take you to the weirdest parts of your brain, right? Like, I will always end up watching bears killing people. Like, that's where I will end up. You know what I mean? Like, I will always. That's the end of my rabbit hole.
Man of culture.
Yeah. Like, I will always end up in weird World War II conspiracies. Like, that is the end of my track. There's an end of everybody's track for everybody, right? Don't get to the end of your track.
Well, the tough part for a lot of people is that it could be their ego, it could be self-protective mechanisms that people are reluctant to acknowledge how much of their own thinking in their lives are not in control of.
Yeah.
How much of their behavior is, I look at it almost like as like a computer program. And it's like it has like a sequential which line of code goes in order, which does what. And I could see it myself when I'm doing stuff around my apartment or my place or at work, that I'll just do stuff automatically without thinking about it. And it's and maybe it's beneficial. It could be like, all right, you wake up and you make a cup of coffee, you make some eggs and bacon, or healthy things. You go for a walk outside, healthy things. And then there's times when I'm like, pick up my phone, scroll for 20 minutes. Like, that's not healthy. When did that get programmed in? But at some point in my history, my past, whatever it was, there are things going on, and you say to yourself, well, I made the decision to pick up my phone. Like, not really. Not as much as you think you did. There's an interesting thing I heard, how the social media companies and the phone and tech companies and whatnot for everything with the phones, what they did, they're actively trying to reduce the amount of time it takes you to get into your phone. Yeah. And one of the things most recently was like facial recognition. That, like, you don't have to punch in a number or punch in a code, do a little swipe pattern or press something. You could literally just hold it up to your face. You're in right there. And maybe that cut off 2 seconds, but that 2 seconds amounted to how many more billions of dollars of revenue and ad revenue from you spending that much more time. And like, now you have 3 more opportunities throughout the day, or 5 more opportunities throughout the day, that you're on Facebook, you're on Instagram, you're on Twitter or Snapchat or X, whatever it's called, that you're spending more time, and they're just doing everything they can to just become behavioral. Even I notice this now with, like, anyone notices, like if like a phantom text in your pocket when you think you got a text, but even then, it's like, if you got a text, your brain is just now, even if you're having a conversation with somebody, as soon as you feel that vibration, your brain's like, I gotta go check it. Go pull it out of your pocket. Something important just happened. You have to see what it is. And it's like, there's realistically nothing in the world that could be that goddamn important, unless you're like a 911 paramedic who needs to take those calls. Most things are not life-ending. And I noticed I did this with myself. I didn't recommend other people do it too. Is that I basically, at some point recently, I deleted like 90% of the apps on my phone, so they only have like one screen of apps that's right there at the beginning. And if it wasn't absolutely important to my day-to-day, I just got rid of it. And it took me like a week or two to just like stop compulsively just checking to see if there's something, because it would have been a text, so it could be on Discord, YouTube video, random news, whatever it was. And after a while, it's just like, all right, now it's just like family and work text and nothing else. And now I feel like I have so much more focus to do things out in the world when I'm walking around doing stuff.
Yeah, I always say to people that if they think that they don't have a social media problem, right? And I think we all kind of have social media. Mark Benioff, of the CEO of Salesforce, said that Meta is a cigarette company, and basically I called a class trader for it, which I found really interesting. But he's right. That being said, if you really think that you don't have a problem, go without your social media apps for one day. Like, delete them off of your phone for a day, and see how many times you're reaching for your phone to grab and like look at your phone. I calendarize it. So I do a week every quarter. Every quarter, I just take a week off of all the social media apps. It's part of like how I live, right? Like how I make a living. And so like I just plan posts out and stuff like that, like especially on LinkedIn and places like that. But you don't need it to survive. None of you that are listening to this need it to survive. And see how much of a junkie you are and how many times you're reaching for your phone. And then see how gross you feel the next day when you're looking at Instagram Reels for 4 minutes or whatever. It's crazy. The screen time thing, it's like a buzz in your pants, and then like you're notified of your sins. It's so funny. But during the course of writing this book, decided that I was going to abstain completely from social media. So it was the last 3 months of the book writing. I had no social media, and I swear to God, I was like Bradley Cooper with the Limitless till like the last month. It was crazy. It was crazy. Like I felt like I was flying. And it's so what you quickly find is how not aware you are of the world that's happening around you. You know, like if you're waiting in line at Starbucks, like everybody's just looking at their phone, or like you go out to the bar, have a drink, and maybe you're like someone who travels and you're alone and you're just like locked in your phone. You know what I mean? There's so many accidental conversations that I found out I was missing out in life. Or even like little things, like I would be listening to a podcast in the grocery store, right? Which is great. Like I felt like I was like, I'm still engaging in something that's good. But when I didn't have the headphones on, like I had really cool, interesting conversations with people in the bread aisle. And there's so many of those like little micro things that we're missing throughout the course of life that get us in touch with reality and get us back to a place of like feeling like we're part of a society and a community that we're all missing out on.
I had this concept of productivity creep.
Yeah.
And I respect it depending on what you're trying to do, but that like some people, simplest example is like Instacart, where you can go online, you can find out exactly what you want to eat, and you can press a button and somebody packs it for you, and you just show up, pick it up, and leave. And maybe it saves you half an hour to an hour, like a week shopping. Even better, they bring it out to your car now. But the counterpoint to that is like, well, what are you missing out on when you don't do that? Like, especially if like the best example is if you have little kids, for example, maybe it's easier and more convenient than taking them, putting them in the shopping cart like we used to when we were younger, when shopping carts actually had those little spot for kids. I don't think they even do anymore. That you're not getting you're not getting walking around as much. You're not socializing with people, especially if you live in a pretty tight knit community or generally community people you're familiar with. You're not having random conversations you might have been having. That time you spend shopping, looking at new products, could be time you could just almost be relaxing. So it's almost like meditative to be able to just walk around and just like check out the meat, check out the bread, check out whatever you're trying to buy. And then even bigger than that is like if you have kids, especially if they're little kids, they're not getting opportunities to practice behaving and socializing in public. And when you take just that, when you reduce all of that down to just press a button online into Instacart, you realize there's so much more value you're getting out of those interactions and experience of going food shopping or going out somewhere socially or going to talk to someone versus just buying everything on Amazon or going whatever it may be. And it saves time, but the sacrifice is you're losing something else somewhere, and it's hard to quantify, but it is there.
Yeah, I think it's really funny that you mentioned that. I have a whole section of the book that's just called "Stop Door Dashing" because we are like the craziest part about an Instacart or a DoorDash. You know, it's one thing in 2005 you order Chinese takeout, like or you order delivery. Like at least you have to talk to the guy. You know, like now, like literally, it's like a shadow person that takes a picture of it, and then you open up your door, and like the magical food has appeared. You know, and we all got really adjusted to that kind of thing happening over COVID, and it's not good for you. Like, it's not good to not talk to the delivery. Like, we should all be engaged in the process in which things are coming to us, right? Like, I think the closer you can get to your food supply, the better, right? When you go to the grocery store, go beyond the grocery store. Like, go to the butcher shop and talk to the guy that like literally brought that cow in this morning. Like he knows the farmer who who killed the cow and has known the cow for 10 years. And like also that beef is going to be way better for you than whatever plastic crap shit you can get at the grocery store. But also you're better connected to your food supply. So you'll be more respectful of it and respectful of your eating, right? Or go to the farmer's market, right? It's going to be cheaper than the grocery store. We're all struggling with the grocery store right now, right? Like the prices are not going down. So get the corn at the farmer's market in your local town and shake hands with the guy that actually made it. And then when you go and make that corn later for your kids, like you'll know exactly where it came from. Like that's an experience. And again, it's going to take a little bit more time. And the productivity thing is so true, right? Like you see people online. You can't export your entire life, right? You can't.
Depending on who you ask, you probably could, but is it healthy?
Yeah, I don't think
is the question. It's not healthy. Yeah.
It's not healthy. And you can, right? You can get someone to do just about everything for you, but I don't think it's healthy.
Yeah. Do you know who Alex Hormozy is?
I do. Yeah. And his wife Leela. Oh yeah.
Yeah. I just finished watching a video before this podcast recording about how they talk about like finding time in your week. And he actually, at some point in the video, he quantifies like how much would it take to outsource your food prep? How much would it take to outsource your laundry or outsource your this or that? And he's like, add it all up over the course of the month, on average, about $1,500. But if you put that $1,500, you can get about an average of like 96 hours per month back. And it's, for someone like him, he genuinely loves like business, hard work at all costs, be the absolute best you could be, leave no stone unturned, which is fantastic. But I wonder how many people out there really can keep up with that pace of life or that style of life without really crumbling in ways without realizing it.
Yeah, and I think that's what's. I don't think it's troubling, but it's
hustle culture.
Like, yeah, I think people like Alex, right? Like, I think he actually lives that life, and I think it's what makes him happiest. I think giving that advice out to the regular normal person is worrisome because, first of all, the regular normal person might get burnt out, right? But also, if you're saying like, hey, it's completely okay to like outsource your life, it is not. Most normal people will not replace the time that they spent Instacarting with something valuable, right? It is just more time to play Call of Duty, right? It's I didn't have to get up from the couch. I can play another match, and someone's gonna bring me the Totino's pizza rolls, and I don't have to go get pizza rolls. That's how it goes for most people, right? And I do think too the hustle culture. Like, listen, I'm a really hard worker. I love working, but I do think it does make people feel really anxious about work when it should be a feeling of joy, right? Like, if you're not, those people step away too. They take vacations. Like, I've seen Alex Hormozy on a yacht, dude. Like, he takes time off. You know, he takes weeks off, and he's a wife that he loves and spends a lot of time with. Now she's like a hustle hard person too, right? But like they take time off, right? So it's a weird, delicate balance to play, right? Because like you don't want to tell people to not work hard, because like I believe in hard work, right? Like when I wrote this book, I worked 40 hours a week and I wrote 60 hours, right? Like I didn't sleep a lot. But you also, yeah, it's a delicate balance to play. I don't know how else to describe it, but it's a delicate balance to play. I think go ahead.
So there's a good book I'd recommend if you're interested in reading. It's called The Hypomanic Edge. And basically what it talks about is how America was essentially founded on the children of manic depressive immigrants in a nutshell.
Yeah.
And that being hypomanic essentially is like you're one step below manic depressive. And he talks about like Alexander Hamilton, William Penn, the founder of Pennsylvania, Andrew Carnegie. These people were like, we work like if there's 168 hours a week, we work 167.5 of them. Yeah. We sleep for half an hour once a week, and then we go right back to work. And that's just what that personality type and that genetic structure and everything does. And then when you get children of those immigrants, especially what America did in a nutshell was essentially say to the entire world, it's like, if you've got a batshit crazy idea you want to try out, we're not going to stop you. And if you succeed at doing it, go for it. It's essentially like the American dream in a nutshell. I guess the problem is that the world is also occupied by comparatively, I wouldn't say normal people, it's a bit of an insult, but like not as intense CEO types.
Yeah.
And especially nowadays, like how do you strike that balance between these like people at the top with the winner take all mentality and the people in the middle who are just like, we just want to have a barbecue on weekends and see our kids at night and just relax without you crushing us in the process? Because it's helpful to have people like Jeff Bezos, Elon Musk, Steve Jobs, Bill Gates, all those people doing crazy innovative stuff like they do. But at some point, like you're going to end up steamrolling the person that is your customer by accident, and then you have a mass like the wealth gap you see today. A big part of that problem is like there are people there who have no problem hustling 25 hours a day and 8 days a week, trying to get to as far and as fast as they can, but inadvertently killing off mom and pop shops, local, like the butcher and things like that. Like Whole Foods is going to just blow up every mom and pop shop within a 5-mile radius of everyone that starts up with. And things like that. Like, where do you strike the balance? How do you get those two going? It's very difficult to figure out.
Have you ever read, I would highly suggest if you haven't, just on the topic of the founding fathers being manic depressive, Ben Franklin's journals are the weirdest things I've ever read in my life.
The weirdest, you said?
Yeah, in a good way. But like he would like, first of all, like he was like obsessed with lucid dreaming. So like he slept with like a bell in his hand and like all sorts of stuff to like wake himself up while he was having interesting dreams. But like he rated himself on every single day, like down to like the strength of his, like, then that's not a joke. Like
these journals.
Yeah, like when we would talk about like type A, like radical personality. Yeah, it's you know what's interesting about America, and if we want to get into a specifically American context, is you have that first generation. Yeah, I mean we are a country filled with a group of people whose first ancestors to come here were in a place in life that they were willing to move across the world to run away from whatever they were.
What's interesting about that is the fact that people will talk a lot about the immigrant story.
Yeah.
And people coming here with basically nothing, having to live in total crap conditions, just trying to start a business. What they don't talk about the other side of that is a lot of immigrants went back home.
Yeah.
Because they couldn't handle it. They couldn't do it. So the ones who stayed here, it's not to say they were the better ones, but it's like they may have had a natural genetic propensity to withstand stress way more than the people who went back.
Yeah.
And so you end up creating this massive filtration system where you take everyone from around the world and like who has that crazy ambitious, that stress tolerance, that work ethic that's just built, not even like that people don't want to work hard, but the built-in psycho, hyper manic depressive work ethic. Those people have kids and then send them to America, and then America becomes what it is right now. And it's essentially a giant experiment to see like how long can we keep this productivity going without something breaking along the way.
Yeah, and I wonder too, right? Like, well, and also, right, you create an economic structure around that basically rewards those behaviors, which has led to, I mean, arguably, you take the good and the bad of America, right? But like, America doesn't exist. 80% of the world is still in poverty, probably. Like the uplift that the world economy has had because of the what we talk about, like the hypermanic people in America, innovating, inventing, whatever, and what it's done for the entirety of the world. I mean, listen, there's America, and then you see the world graph population, right? Like the innovations that have been made in this country in the last 200 years have certainly changed human civilization as we know it forever. You know, like look around Europe, wherever you are right now. Like I've got a TV over there that's American. You know, that's an American invention. Like I can't look at anything in my apartment without seeing America's hands all over it. You know what I mean? Like, oh, interchangeable parts. Oh, we invented the personal computer. Oh, we invented this. We invented that. Like the TV, the radio, mass manufacturing, applied leather. Like you just look at every little thing. It's like, oh, everything that I touch right now has been created in the last 200 years, 90% by an American. That's insane. Like that's an insane experiment that we're conducting. And yeah, I wonder how long we can go on the track of this. I think a long time.
Hopefully a long time. Yeah. I've had this thing recently that I've kind of broken through finally, which is this idea of, I think you might have mentioned in your book too, zero-sum games. That I had a problem with the idea of like doing what I'm doing, whatever I'm doing as far as my work is. I run my own business. So it's like, it's basically a make or break depending on what I do.
Yeah.
And there are times when I'll see I do massage therapy, so I have my little massage business, but like I'll go to other places and I'll just see how like terrible they're running their business. And it doesn't take a whole lot to see that like your customer service intake sucks, like the room is kind of messy, like all these little things. And it does, part of me feels like, well, if I succeed and I take business away from them, they're losing, therefore it's a zero-sum game, and then I'm a bad person. When in reality, ideally, what ends up happening is your massage is a weird one because you're producing something in the form of taking away stress and pain, which then maybe reduces the cost of medical bills later on and things like that. I do mostly medical massage, but I think people have this problem, like the zero-sum game, thinking like there's a cap on the number of resources available to do things with, and we have to be careful about it. And like capitalism, is it a good system? Yeah. It has its flaws too, but the one thing that pops into my mind along that zero-sum game thing is the idea of like places like Africa, which they are ridiculously resource rich. But the problem is the structure of society, and mostly the structure of the government, doesn't allow for people to innovate and try new things and implement new stuff to modernize it the way they want to. So people will look at it and say like, oh, it's not fair because they're not doing as well because it's a zero-sum game, versus saying like, well, actually the systems they have in place are not allowing the potential there to actually unfold the way it could.
Yeah, I mean, Africa's an interesting case too, because we can talk about why those governments are in place and all that kind of stuff.
That's true. Yeah.
And then you could point to the downstream effects of capitalism too, right? And that being a potential cause. But I mean, it's well beyond that. Yeah, I think capitalism is the best system. It's the worst system, but it's the best we have. You know what I mean? I've never seen a better. I do wonder though. We're heading towards a place where, you know, America was a really scrappy country because it had to be. and we talk about that hypomania and like the hustle culture and all that stuff. I wonder how long that lasts because we sit on such a bed of wealth. You know, if you live in America and you make $10,000, which is under what we would consider the poverty line, you are one of the richest 5% of people in the world.
Yeah.
Like we are so incredibly lucky. Being in like the stresses of the middle class in the modern American context are not putting food on the table. Like it's a very uniquely modern phenomenon what's happening in most of the Western world, right? Like for most of time, being in the middle class meant like, yeah, you're probably going to eat this week, and you have a house or a dot like somewhere to live. Now it's like now it's two cars, the whatever refrigerator, like it's building like legitimate wealth. The idea of like a middle class that builds legitimate, and a middle class that's eroding in America, by the way, but like of a middle class that's like basically generating wealth and generational wealth that 70% of the country has money to give to the next generation is such a uniquely modern phenomenon. And how quickly does that become like we move more like Europe, where 80% of people really don't give a flying hoot if they are at the top, right? They're like, I want to take 2 months vacation and hang out. And then obviously the wealth erodes over time, and it's interesting to see where we will go in our lifetime and what my kids are going to be like in kind of America. And I'm not in like a fear mongering state either, where I think America won't exist. It'll be different, I'm sure, but I don't think we're at the end of the empire. Hopefully not, anyway. But I think the news and social media and all of that stuff has done a terrible job of making us all really terrified of what is honestly like a really easy time to live. It just really, really damages your brain. It's really disorienting. It disorients you into thinking you're in a much worse state of being, whether it's in your personal life, in your financial life, whatever, than you actually are. You know?
There's a book by Robert Sapolsky. It's called Why Don't Zebras Get Ulcers? He's a very famous biologist, and it talks basically the whole point of the book is the effects of stress on the body.
Mm-hmm.
And one thing that really struck out to me was this idea that like it's a two-sided coin in that it's not your living conditions that stress you out as much as it is your perception of your living conditions. That like if maybe you're poor but you have enough to eat and you have a house and you can like be creative with what you have. Maybe you have a whole lot of toys, but you're creative with the toys, like, and you're not aware that your parents are struggling. You'll be a very happy and just mentally healthy kid. But if you're aware of your parents' struggles, they really put it on top of you to say, like, they encourage you to get a job at a young age because it's like, yeah, we're helping out the family. Oh, you feel good because you're part of the group. Versus like, we literally can't pay the water bill this month unless you get a job. Right. That's a different kind of feeling of stress. But the flip side of that is, and I think you mentioned somewhere in your book, this quote that's like, it's not about how much you have, it's about enjoying what you do have. Mm-hmm. That I wonder if there's this large scale effect of like frog in boiling water, where it's like you mentioned, the middle class eroding, that there's a little less to have, but it's so gradual that you kind of get used to it. You acclimate to it. It doesn't really bother you as much. And that within that winner take all mentality, that like more and more of the resources are getting pulled too heavily at the top. And you mentioned, are we at the Indian Empire and whatnot? There's another book. That's Ray Dalio, very famous hedge fund investor. It's called Principles for Dealing with a Changing World Order. And he runs through these 6 steps, essentially, of how every major empire throughout history rose and then fell. And that it was like 6 phases they went through. And generally speaking, it was like in the beginning, it's usually post-war, post-calamity of some sort. In the beginning, they're poor and they know they're poor. And then they start working hard and they're making a little bit of money, but they still feel like they're poor. And then they start doing really well and they're kind of okay with it. And then all of a sudden they're like, wow, we're doing really, really well. We could just start spending our asses off. Who the hell cares? We're rich and we know we're rich. And then at some point, debts start building so freaking heavily that you're still convinced you're rich, but you're borrowing so having us a future in the form of like debt bubbles that are forming, because you're trying to maintain your lifestyle and the forward pace and the progression, the speed at which you're going with growth and whatnot in the country, that you're willing to just build and build and build debt until the debt gets so big that it causes a 2008 or other things like that. So kind of mega collapse to happen. And there's a lot of arguments to say that America is like stage 5-ish,
Yeah.
somewhere in that range right now. How long it's going to be before it pops, who knows? Because the biggest difference is that we are on a massive global interconnected economy, whereas we never really were to this degree before. CrowdStrike recently is a perfect example of how like that one company screwed up and then it just... What was that?
Don't tell my stock portfolio about CrowdStrike.
Yeah. But that one company made that mistake, and it just I the other day I went out to go get gas from my car, and the guy at the pump was like, "Oh, we cash only." I'm like, "Oh, are the things down in this specific pump?" It's like, "No, all the pumps across the whole friggin' world are down right now, plus all the banks, plus all that." And I was like, "Holy shit." How connected it is. But this is a really cool opportunity to see how ridiculously interconnected everything is globally.
Yeah, what's interesting too is that we're not the only ones who are debt spending at this point. Every major, what we would consider empire, like every major power, is like essentially living on debt, including China, including Russia, including all of the European powers. Like we're not the only ones. Like we're all heavily indebted into each other, which is why I think we haven't broken out into a world war since the 1940s, because like no one can afford to do it. Like China's economy would collapse if they lost a Walmart contract. You know what I mean? Like if Walmart just decided tomorrow we're not going to buy anything from China, like there are numbers, like you can look up the numbers, but their economy would collapse. Like they're so dependent on the American consumer. That would be like that would be like 9% of the Chinese economy just like evaporating. So that we're all deficit spending, we're all banking on the future. So I don't know, yeah, and we're hyper interconnected. But we're also all borrowing from each other now, and no one seems to have great power economically over anybody, right? Like the American consumer is important, but Chinese manufacturing is important. Russia, as much as it, like Putin is doing Putin things, like their agricultural state is still incredibly important. Also, their natural resources, everything like that. Europe is also kind of a consumer state. They've completely decimated their wilderness. Thank you, Teddy Roosevelt, for keeping ours. We will be the only ones left on Earth with woods. It's us in Canada. So everybody give a shout out to Teddy Roosevelt. Give a big thank you for our national parks. And so, like in that system, like there's so much about free trade that is so hard to track against history. You know, because it's not the Silk Road, right? Like we're talking about every human being. We live a little bit more in a, and this is not, I'm not saying like some Alex Jones conspiracy theory right now, but we do live like a little bit in like a one world kind of state, right? Like we live in a fully globalized state. And so I think the individual governments will all proceed to have less power over time in comparison to each other, but more power over the individual, if that makes sense.
Yeah. All right. Well, this was a fun little segue into world geography and politics and things like that. But dialing back to your story in your book, and this is really more about the individual level then, like this is a lot of stress for a lot of people to be under with inflation going the way it is and the way that people are drastically trying to change, their identity and keep up with the Jones and whatnot, their social media and whatnot. It kind of ties into your story, which was that you were pretending to be somebody you weren't. And it was literally causing your body physiological distress in the form of anxiety attacks, with a suicide attempt and things like that. So what was your starting points of how you got on the right track towards becoming who you are? You mentioned in your book, breathing, for starters.
Yeah. Well, I think the first thing you have to do is identify the problem, which was incredibly hard to do. But what I noticed in me is what is probably true for everybody. If they really take a look at it, it's that I was just completely overstimulated. All of the negative emotions that I was feeling in my life were all over poured into by the environment in which I was living. Right. Whether you want to take into, I mean, it's mostly social media, right? Like I was in high school and the advent of social media, but social media was huge in that factor. The news, the environments in which we live in, people living around people that were influenced by social media. All of it was pretty much created by my modern context and being the dopamine addicts that we all are. So yeah, I think somehow manually resetting that stimulation module. So our brains work in a way that, and I know that you know this, but 90% of our thoughts happen in our subconscious, not our conscious mind, right? And when our conscious mind is occupied, the subconscious takes over. The problem is our subconscious is an animal brain. It's the same brain that a lizard has. And so when you are when your conscious is full, right? When you're constantly have your attention stolen from your device or whatever you're doing, you're constantly stressed out about something else, your subconscious takes over and you basically are existing in a state where you're having as much fear as like being chased by a lion. And most human beings are existing in that state right now. Like the thing that we drone out with to cause us less stress, our cell phone, is actually inherently causing us more stress. Right. And so that stimulation cycle just continues, continues, and continues. That's why no one can fall asleep. That's why, I mean, there's a myriad of things, right? That's why we're all more easily agitated. We all have more anger. We're all more depressed. So being able to reset that system, right? And so what I did was I started instituting just really simple meditations like box breathing that legitimately changed my life forever. I changed some things about it. So if anybody doesn't know what box breathing is, it's you inhale for 4 seconds, you hold your breath for 4 seconds, you breathe out for 4 seconds, and you breathe, and then you hold your breath again for 4 seconds. So I'll say that again. You inhale for 4 seconds, you hold your breath for 4 seconds, you exhale for 4 seconds, and then you hold your breath for another 4 seconds. And then just set a timer on your phone for 5 minutes and just do that. Only focus on counting the breaths and doing the breaths, right? If you do that for 5 minutes and you open your eyes, that is what you're supposed to feel like all of the time. That is what your base state of emotions is, right? Once you clear out all that additional stimulus, that's what your life is supposed to be. So do that, and then come back to this podcast and tell me that you don't feel like an incredibly different human, because you will. You will. All those stresses, all that anxiety, everything that's going on in your day, if you just find a way to manually reset and kind of flush all of that stuff out, you will feel incredibly better. And so I started instituting it in my life just as like a morning and nighttime practice, just as like a reset. Like all my panic attacks stopped, like out of nowhere, just because I was able to like just push all of that stuff out. So for an everyday normal person who maybe isn't dealing with something that serious, it's just we all need to reset. We're all constantly stimulated. We're never sitting in silence. Just take a moment. No podcast, no nothing. Just be, and you'll be surprised what happens in your life.
Yeah, box breathing. I think a lot of people, when I hear it, a lot of people think of it came from, I believe it's from sniping. Sounds a little bit morbid. Yep. But even before that, I'm pretty sure the yogis in India, I think, had figured this out too. Yeah. But it's a lot of people will hear that or see that and think of that and think like, that's too simple. And they're like that. It has to be a super duper ultra complex way of doing. But the simplicity in it, and it's funny that you mentioned with like the stress and things like that. That if you ever watch like an animal out in nature, if you happen to have the fortunate luck to see like a gazelle being chased by a lion, they're really stressed out. They're trying to not get eaten. But once they get away, they need that time when they're at this heightened state in their sympathetic nervous system to calm back down and relax into their into the parasympathetic. And it could be panting, it could be breathing, it could be relaxing, but they have the time. Like 95% of their lives is just spent just chilling out, eating grass, pooping, having sex, whatever they do. But that 5% is where but we've inverted it. Now we're 5% relaxed and 95% stressed, because that lion is at our doorstep all the time in the form of our wife, our kids, our boss, an unhappy home, an unhappy marriage, an unhappy job, whatever it may be, that people are just, they don't realize how many stressors are sitting in the back of their mind the whole time.
Yeah, completely. And it's not just that they have those stressors sitting in the back of their mind. It's that if they have a cup of water that's stress, the things that we go to get less stressed, right? Whether that's TV or movies or our phones or video games, are not like taking the cup and pouring it out. Like it's actually just putting more water in an already full cup and then starting to overflow. Right. And so you need to reset the cup. You need to pour the cup out. Like you need to empty the cup, and inputting things is not how we fix things. Right. Back to like the American culture thing, and I promise I'll bring it back. We're not going to get into world geography again. One of the problems with American culture is we have looking for quick fixes to every problem that we possibly have, but all of those fixes being consuming something. Right. We always think of like, if there's a problem, I consume for it. If my knee hurts, I take this pill. If I need to lose weight, I will go. We're going to take Ozempic. Which by the way, that's a completely valid drug. I'm not trying to poo-poo on Ozempic. If I feel sad, I will drink. Right? Like our entire lives are just built on consuming things, and so the idea of solving a problem by doing the opposite is really hard for people to understand. But you actually need to do the opposite to remove kind of the overstimulation cycle that you got.
Yeah, I had a friend of mine recently who had a digestive issues, and they got like a touch of like diverticulite, and came to me because I've used to be into personal training. I'm very big into health and wellness, exercise, things like that. And it came to me and said, like, well, what do I do? What do I take? I found this pill online. I found this. I found that. What do you think of this pill? And I said, take everything you're eating, just cut it all out for 2 weeks. Chicken and brown rice and water. Salt and pepper if you want. Nothing else but that. Just reset. Well, the pill seems pretty good. No. Just like, because you don't know what's causing the distress. And this is like elimination diets work fantastically because you can basically cut out everything and add it in one at a time. And when you get a reaction, you know exactly what caused the trigger in the first place. So when you have 25 different, I have 2 types of patients with massage therapy I've noticed nowadays, which is like, I have a section of my intake form that says like medications. Either they're taking like nothing, one thing, or like 10 different things.
Yeah.
It's never in between. It's like maybe you have high blood pressure and you have medication. Okay, you've got cholesterol. Okay, you've got migraines. Okay, or you're doing pretty. Or it's like I've got 15 different medications because I have medications to offset the effects of other medications to offset the effects of other medications, and my doctors are just stacking them one on top of the other without actually trying to like pull it back and seeing what's working, what's not working, and how much of this is your lifestyle and not just you. But okay, yeah. And looking at the chapters of your book without giving away the whole book, I like the part where you start doing the work. Let's talk about self-image and touching grass. I love that title, by the way.
Yeah, I giggled. I was debating whether or not having those because it's kind of like a term of not endearment these days. But so the book is in 3 phases, and I'll blow the lead. It's fine. So the first phase is the inputs, right? And kind of what we just talked about right now. It's a lot about like reconciling your consumption patterns, all that kind of stuff, dealing with the overstimulation cycle, kind of the psychology that goes behind that. Also, I say the F word a lot in the book. I just want to get that out there. And the second part is doing the work. So that is once you've kind of reconciled all of the inputs, right? Your consumption patterns, whether that's the consumption of media, consumption of food, consumption of stimulus, all that stuff, then you actually are in a space where you can work on yourself, right? But you have to clean up all that stuff first. And what I think is interesting about the self-image part, and specifically the touch grass part, is that you have a lot of agency over your own mental health. I think we've done a really bad job in this country of, like, oh, we advocate for mental health. Like, we love mental health. And that's like, okay, now some celebrity just says, we love you and go to a therapist you can't afford. But you have agency over yourself. You have a lot of agency over your own mental health too. And doing the work is really evaluating yourself. These chapters were written in really like, what ways can you evaluate yourself to understand and identify your own problems and part of your own journey. And the touch grass piece is really just getting in touch with reality, whether it's the reality of where we are in the world, the reality of just you need to go outside. Like everybody needs to spend time outside, go get some vitamin D right now. 68% of Americans are deficient in vitamin D. It's like your number one happiness hormone. Like, go outside.
It's free sunlight. Just go walk outside and soak it up.
Free.
Yeah.
By the way, vitamin D pills, and again, we just had this whole pill conversation, but like, let's say you live in Minneapolis in the wintertime and it's really hard to get outside. It's the cheapest, safest supplement you can possibly get. Mm-hmm. It's so, yeah, talk to your doctor, take some vitamin D. But also when you get out in nature and when you get out in reality, you re-in touch with reality. That the distorted view that you start to get of the world when you're stuck in your house and you're alone is so much different than where you sit in the real world. Most people like you, right? When you talk to most people, they like you. I promise you. Like, that you are probably a really great, interesting person, and you've been shielding yourself because you think otherwise. But most people like you. Most people enjoy you. Most people are proud of you just for getting up this morning. Right? I'm proud of you for just getting up this morning. Like, being a human's hard. Most humans understand that. We spend our lives thinking that, like, the whole world is angry at each other and upset. I don't know, man. I've been to the grocery store recently. Most people are really pretty nice, if you actually just take the time to be open and talk to them. And so touch grass is really about that, right? Like, literally actually touch grass, first of all. Go outside, like, put your feet on the ground, exist in nature. It's a beautiful thing. Again, thank you, Teddy Roosevelt. You have parks that you can go to. But also get in touch with reality. And that you are in a really a much better spot in this world than you ever thought you were.
I like the chapter. The title was "Be Comfortable Being Uncomfortable." That's a big problem I think we have nowadays, that we as human beings, we adapted to a world that was basically constantly trying to kill us and starve us and do us. And like, we are very, very, very well adjusted to dealing with challenges. but a lot of people don't have the kind of challenges they need. They have I would say like the wrong kind of challenge would be like, the person who's working 3 jobs, barely scraping by, can't even afford their rent, trying to afford to pay bills. That's not the kind of challenge you want. But on the flip side of that, you also get people who are multi-million, multi-billion-dollar CEOs and well off this and that are just miserable because it's not the money that made them happy. It was the challenge it took to get there. And then once they get there, they this is Alex Hormozy again. They're like, he's worth like $500 million a year, and he still works like 80 hours a week. Why? Because he loves the challenge, not the money. If he went broke, he'd be doing the exact same thing tomorrow, starting from the bottom and working his way back up. But a lot of people don't realize that their pursuit of being comfortable is ironically making them more uncomfortable.
Correct. I think, and the point you called out perfectly there is the pursuit of comfortability, right? Your pursuit should not be to be comfortable. You shouldn't go to work to make money because it's going to make you more comfortable, right? Because you want to be more comfortable and you want to relax more. You should go to work because you want to learn something and get better at something and learn something about yourself as a human being or a culture or whatever. Like, it should always be about like, how can this improve my life, as opposed to how can it make it more comfortable, right? How can your end state should not be like, I want to be the most comfortable zombie that lays on the couch and like has a tube pumping my favorite food into my mouth and I look perfect all the time. Like that is the end state of like a person who's always seeking comfortability, right? That is like the ideal end state. Now, most people, that's not an attainable life for most people, but like that is the end state of like, if you go down the road of comfortability. I also think we need to seek more uncomfortability within our own selves. In identifying the things about ourselves that maybe aren't so savory. A lot of the time, the quote unquote flaws we have in our personalities or who we are not our fault. But that it's on you to fix it. No one else can fix you for you. You have to fix you. And all anyone's really expecting is you getting a little bit better every day. And in the pursuit of that, you will find out all of the great things about you that you never even knew. It's being comfortable, being uncomfortable is really about not being scared of the pursuit of uncomfortable things, right? And we come into friction all day, every day. I would argue that's not uncomfortability. That's just being a human. It's really seeking that discomfort. That's where the journey starts with finding who you really are and becoming a confident, well-known to yourself individual, right? Because you don't know who you are until you've been put through something and you've put yourself through something.
And then some of the later chapters you have burn the house that ego built.
Yeah. Summarize really quickly. Stop judging people. Stop being an asshole. But also, other people's judgment really doesn't matter that much. They're probably having a bad day. Stop. The moment you do things, the moment you take action on something because of how other people think of it, are going to think of you because of it, you're letting those people control your life. So if you buy a car because your neighbor's going to like it, your neighbor controls your life, you don't control your life. Right? If you take a job because your parents want that job for you, your parents control your life. If you go to the gym because other people want you to look good, they control your life, not you. Where you think other people will make it's often you think that other people will look good, right? So take agency in your own decisions, figure out what you're doing for you and not for anyone else.
The comfortable being uncomfortable thing, I've done, it's been helpful for me to at least to kind of recognize this pattern. When I was younger, had a bit of like, my social media was video games. I got very big into World of Warcraft and things like that growing up, a lot of video games. Ended up being an escape. Well, ironically being like, there was challenges in it, but it wasn't really meaningful challenges in terms of like growing your life and building your career and your resume and things like that. It was just like false challenges. It was kind of pretending to your brain to think, oh, this is actually difficult. If you overcome this, you'll be a better person. Like, I'm not gonna be able to tell anybody about like how strong I was in Call of Duty the other day or whatever it was. But I've noticed myself, even to this day, with like the podcast, for example, I'm on episode. I think I published like 5 episodes so far, but I've got like 10 or 15 backlog that I'm working through editing right now. That when I first started editing it, no idea what I was doing. It was complete trial and error. It was banging my head against the wall, frustrating. And what I noticed that every time I hit like a point where I wasn't sure what the next step was, and I had to sit in this zone between like what I just did and what to do versus what the next step is like that zone of uncomfortable discomfort, of uncertainty, because you don't know, is this the right thing to do? Is this the wrong thing? Who won't even know? And then even then it's still going to be wrong. And so this will be something better no matter what you do. And when those moments would hit, that's when I would instinctively open up Facebook, YouTube, fire up a video game, check my phone, want to go for a walk. There's a piano off to the side. I want to start practicing piano. And the urge to do that was just like, I just want to check Instagram so badly right now. But why didn't I want to do 10 minutes ago when I knew what I was doing? Well, you're in the uncomfortable zone right now. And learning to say to yourself, when that urge hits you, that means you're in that zone and you have to just stay here as long as you can because eventually those interests will fade away and your brain will go, okay, why don't we try this with the podcast? Thank you. That's what I wanted you to say. That's what I wanted you to do, was keep focusing on what you're doing. And the more you practice that, the smaller and smaller and smaller that zone gets. Now it's like, I feel like checking my phone. Wait, no, I know what I can do next. Go to the podcast editing, advertising, check out whatever, networking, talking about, and then like the little moment it hits you smaller and smaller. But that's comfort in being uncomfortable, because eventually the uncomfortable will become comfortable and you'll have to find the next new uncomfortable to keep pushing yourself into. And at the end of it all, this is what you always hear very commonly, people who are like end of life on their deathbed, is always like the handful of regrets of not doing the things they wish they did when they were younger because they were just too afraid to or too afraid. And the biggest misconception people have around something like discomfort and fear and whatnot is that you think fear is your body's way of telling you something's wrong, which is not the worst thing. If you're out in the African savannah and there's lions around, you should listen to that fear. But in today's day and age, that fear really doesn't serve you anymore. And it's very difficult to notice the difference.
Well, and that fear comes from the subconscious brain, right? And so those behaviors are in brain. Like we've been doing, if you are someone who is continuously running from your fear, right? Whether it's like a phone or whatever pursuit that you go down, and all of us do this, it becomes something that you are not consciously doing, right? It is an unconscious behavior that just happens. I feel uncomfortable, I check my phone. I feel uncomfortable, whatever it is, right? I feel uncomfortable, here comes Casey and the Sunshine Band, baby. Like whatever it is, we do it instinctually. That's why I think one of the earliest things that you can do just to better yourself is, I'm telling you, take a social media detox, see how many times you're doing it a day. Because I think a lot of people, I think you're lucky in that you are consciously aware that you were doing it in that uncomfortable zone. But I think before people can even get there, they need to have the wherewithal to be conscious of that they're doing it, right? I think most people are just at work right now and they just picked up their phone and now they're 15 minutes into a reel scroll and they haven't even realized that it happened, right? None of it actually, there was no conscious thought of doing it. It all unconsciously happened. And then they pick their head up.
I've been there before plenty of times.
I've been there too.
Yeah,
of course, we've all been there, right? Because these things are, we have cigarettes in our pocket, basically, and not actual cigarettes, but digital cigarettes.
Digital cigarettes.
We also have digital cigarettes too. They're called vapes, but these things are, And by the way, I'm not demonizing the phone as much as I say, like, it is one of the greatest inventions on planet Earth. But we need to reconcile our behavior with it.
Yeah, and that's something interesting I learned in the previous podcast I recorded. It was with a social worker, and she made a point to say how your amygdala, which essentially is like your, for lack of better, it does a lot of things, but like one thing in particular is like, it's almost like your fear center in your brain. Whenever you feel fear, whenever you feel like nervous, anxiety, like the urge to run away, that's your amygdala firing off because it has perceived something in the environment it perceives as a threat. It might not be. It might be maybe you're sitting there like about to walk on stage to give a talk, a presentation you've never given before. And well, what's going to happen? You're going to walk out there and there's going to be 1,000 people, 100 people, 10 people staring at you. And they're like, it's not normal. It's not something I see every. I don't go walk around every day. The entire world staring at me. What the hell's going? You start to freak out. You get nervous. You get stage fright. But the ironic thing with it is that the only way, from what I understand, to train your amygdala to calm down is through experience.
Yeah.
You can read 10,000 books on it if you want to. Go for it. It's not going to do it. You have to go and experience the thing. And anybody that's ever done something in their life of some capacity, it could be, this could be stage fright, it could be you're a guy approaching a pretty girl at a bar or whatever it may be, and you're nervous and all this stuff. Is like the first couple times you do it, it is like devastatingly embarrassing and painful in your body. You might feel like you want to throw up and do all your anxiety is going through the roof. And then once you realize, oh, it's not actually a lion. It's not going to kill you. You're not going to die. And once you get that experience, 10 times easier to do it afterwards. It's just the first time is like a Band-Aid you're ripping off.
Yeah. The gym is the best example of that, right? It's like if you hear someone who is a 365-day gym goer, and they're like, I can't live without it. It's the greatest thing ever for like my health and my, it's not even about physical health; it's about my mental health. Saying that to someone who doesn't go to the gym, they're like, what the fuck are you talking about? Like that's the scariest place on earth to me. Like every time I go in, it's the worst experience ever. But those people that have been going to the gym went through a period of 2 weeks, 3 weeks, probably 6 months of it being really uncomfortable, them hating it every morning, but the fear complex in their brain needed to build over time such that they knew that every time they went, they were going to get rewarded with the great feelings that you get of serotonin and endorphins and everything afterward. Their brain knew when that alarm went off in the morning, it was actually a good thing, not a bad thing. It takes a long time to build up that resistance, right? You have to build up a certain tolerance to difficult things. And it's every difficult thing you do, right? Every difficult thing is going to have that journey of, it's just, it gets easier every time because you know that you have a repeated feeling of ripping that Band-Aid off and it actually being good.
Yeah, there's another part of your brain. If I'm not a neurologist, maybe someday I will be from all the podcasts. There's a part of your brain on the left side. It's called your nucleus accumbens. And amongst other things it does, it's basically its job in a nutshell is to compare multiple scenarios of like potential output and reward.
Yeah.
So what it'll do essentially is say like, okay, option A, get out of bed, get dressed, drive in your car, go to the gym, work out, feel sore. Option B, sit in bed, don't move.
Yeah.
Option B sounds really good in the cost reward for the next 10 minutes. Option A is better in the cost reward for the next 10 years. Your brain doesn't think in 10-year time spans. Naturally, you have to kind of force it to in a way. And that's part of one of the challenges. When you feel that urge of like, I don't want to be here. I've noticed every time I go to the gym, I notice this. The first 10 minutes I'm there, I'm like, I don't want to be here right now. I've been working out for years, and still, first 10 minutes, I'm just like, Netflix, video games. I could take a nap. I can go read that book and go play some piano. After 10 minutes, I'm like, I'm so glad I'm here right now. So glad. But it's gotten to the point where I anticipate like this first 10 minutes is going to suck, and every time. But I've gotten at the point that I know it's coming, so I expect it. So when it hits me, I don't run away.
Exactly. And in those 10 minutes of suck, you're like, oh, wait a second. I felt this 10 minutes of suck before. It's followed by something great. But you have to know, it's like Pavlov's dogs, man. It's like Psych 101, right? Ring the bell, the dog will salivate.
Yep. Absolutely. The last part of your book is tell your story. What do you feel is the real importance to anybody to not have the fear, or even despite having the fear, to step outside, maybe go on social media? I feel like we're talking bashing it this whole time, but maybe going out there and just saying to everyone, hey, this is what's really happening.
Yeah. I mean, so in that chapter, I like to detail that I don't think everybody has to do everything publicly, right? I don't think you need to do it on social media. I think it's a great thing if you want to tell whatever your story is of difficulty. I think we need more of that and more authenticity on sites like that. And I think you'll actually be helping the ecosystem and the thing that we've been bashing for an hour now. But I think it's important to get outside yourself and at least with the people around you, share what you've been going through. Because I think you'll have some validation in your life of the challenges that you're going through. And I think it is indicative of you as a human being who is going through something to make sure that everyone else around you doesn't feel alone. Because they're going through things too. And you being open and honest and vulnerable with them will allow them to be open and honest and vulnerable with you. And unfortunately, if you just wait around for them to be vulnerable and honest with you, it's never going to happen. But if you take the initiative, you can be the leader in your own little patch of grass, right? No individual person is going to change the world, but you can do a great job changing the 15 people who live around you, and they can change 15 around them, and 15 around them, and 15 around them, right? That's how real change in the world happens, is that we focus on the little patch of grass that's in front of us.
Absolutely. So your book is The Real Confident You, Advice from a 20-something Suicide Survivor. Where can we find the book?
The book is most easily available on Amazon. We have purposely priced the Kindle version at 99 cents because we don't want this information to be price locked by anybody. So I don't think this should be an expensive investment. If you want to get the Kindle version, it's 99 cents. It's also available in paperback, and hardback. Amazon's the easiest place to find it. You can find me on LinkedIn. Just search Patrick Broe. It's linkedin.com/Patrick Broe. And then you can find me on Instagram @PatBroe.
Fantastic. Pat, thank you so much for your time today. Appreciate it.
Thank you so much for your time, Michael. You're great at this, man.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Thank you for joining us today. If you found us informative, thought-provoking, or learned something new, Please leave a review or a comment and tell a friend about the podcast. Feedback means the world to me, as I want to make this the best possible podcast that it can be, and to help others identify the causes of and solutions to problems in their own lives and villages. Until next time, let's keep working on rebuilding the village.